After an incredibly successful crowdfunding campaign, Obsidian's Pillars of Eternity has been eagerly awaited for, not only by its 77,000 backers, but also lovers of Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, and any old-school RPG lover.
Stay out of the woods, and beasts take you if you were planning a stroll through those ruins up there.
While I'll attempt to keep story details as vague as possible, there will be some minor spoilers to the beginning of a game. Sorry. You, the player character, have been caught in a magical storm called a Biwik, a phenomenon that isn't renowned for its safety. A small dungeon and mysterious ritual later, you are now what's commonly referred to as a Watcher, one of a mysterious few who are able to communicate to souls, therefore giving you the ability to see parts of a person's life, or even a previous life.
A Watcher sees souls, reads them, knows their pasts, souls of the living, souls of the dead.
This was a huge reason as to why I got caught up in Pillars lore. It's not often that you see the concept of reincarnation be the dominant theory in RPGs, and it's always fantastic to see a fantasy that divulges from the norm. This, combined with the role that souls play in the story, kept me highly invested with the narrative and its universe. A definite positive for a story-based RPG. What I did find to be an issue was that the various races weren't really talked about through in-game conversations, and the only reason that I had a vague idea of a race's background and biology was because I had taken the time to read about them during the character creation stage.
Name's Adair. Though to the people around here, might as well be 19. Don't think I'd put you much higher than 22. 23 tops. You look like the sort that likes to get involved.
When not in town or going through an in-depth conversation, most of your time will be spent exploring woods and dungeons. And explore you shall. During the first tutorial dungeon, the game recommends the scouting function. This allows your party to enter a stealth mode and simultaneously keep an eye out for traps. This function, particularly when dungeon crawling, is what really reminded me of a game of Dungeons and Dragons, and really kept each area fresh and mysterious, as I tentatively check the corner having no idea what may lie in store. This ability, however, as its name suggests, is only really useful when scouting a new area, meaning that sneaking past enemies can often be next to impossible, since not everyone in your party will be wearing light armor or have a high sneaking skill. Instead, it allows you to begin fights creatively. There were many times when I would be able to set up an ambush, sending my main and secondary tank on either side of a doorway, whilst my ranger scouted ahead and acting as bait, allowing me to create a bottleneck and an easy target for my mage's area of effect spells. It's in combat that things become a little more complicated. I found the game's combat to be horribly difficult at times, and came very close to snapping my keyboard in half more than once. I wouldn't set up these ambushes because I could, but because I had to. And, God forbid, in the occasions where I wasn't able to find a doorway, I'd often become overwhelmed and would be forced to micromanage everyone's actions, using the real-time pause function to no end. Combined with the fact that hits are calculated through rolls of 1 to 100, I would often feel helpless as all of my attacks would barely graze an enemy. The fact that a large amount of combat still relied on chance meant that all the bonuses in the world can't help if I roll a 16. Another issue with the combat is that unit paths and collision are far from perfect, as the heat of battle, which can already be tedious enough, would be even more finicky when I would have to handhold my units around an enemy in order to flank, or just to stop running into a wall. After having to go through 3 or 4 particularly difficult fights, I had noticed that the game's difficulty would often have to do as to whether I was doing a side quest or a main storyline. Though fights during the main story still had its challenges, they never felt impossible, and any deaths I had still gave me hope. Side quests, on the other hand, would often be brutal, including one of the first which asked me to go hunt down a bear, only to have me die in 2 swipes. Getting bored of how long some fights took me to finish meant I eventually swallowed my pride and had to lower the difficulty from normal to easy. However, Even at this level, fights require basic planning, and certain fights are still purposefully difficult and will result in 2 or so party members to faint. Combat itself, when I wasn't complaining, is relatively fun, and health is handled in an interesting manner. Whilst fighting, each character has what is essentially 2 health bars, endurance and health. In a fight, both are constantly taking a toll. However, when your shorter endurance bar goes empty, your character will only faint. It's when your actual health depletes that a character will physically die and will no longer be usable forever.
Some fermented caribou milk would hit the spot right now.
The game, again like Dungeons & Dragons, also makes a distinction between a daily and encounter power. Encounters last as long as one fight, meaning that after beating one group of enemies, your encounter powers will be ready to use for the next fight, and everyone's endurance will be replenished. Daily powers can only be used a certain amount of times before requiring you to rest in order to regain their use, also adding pressure to when you should spend camping supplies and give your party a break.
I cannot keep up this pace.
Resting is also the only way to regenerate your party's HP and to remove fatigue. The fact that you'll be tempted to camp so often, and that you're capped to only hold so many camping supplies, means that your party will be forced to make various journeys back to town in order to sell loot and to restock your gear. The extensive lore, paired with gentle and varied voice acting, makes Pillars of Eternity incredibly easy to get lost in. What was bizarre, however, were the various memorials that can be found whilst exploring dungeons. These were quite obviously part of the rewards from the crowdfunding campaign, and whilst very sweet and great to see, I wondered if they could have been placed in areas that were a little less distracting, such as an inn or various found notes in town. These would ruin the atmosphere of the dark and gloomy catacomb I was exploring, and I would instead giggle as I read various messages left by strangers. This is perhaps the best way to describe Pillars of Eternity. It's a deep, oftentimes serious fantasy world full of unforgiving enemies and traps, but every so often, when exploring the world, you'll find a glimmer of detail which shows just how much love, dedication and passion went into this game. Despite all of its faults and frustrations, Pillars of Eternity did allow me to recreate my dwarven pirate monk, so this and the fact that it's still a fun experience has earned it 7 out of 8 bits. As always, I'm Yacky from the Killer Bits. Feel free to subscribe for more killer content, or follow us on facebook.com/thekillerbits or on twitter.com/thekillerbits. I'll be watching. No, wait, that's creepy.